Okay, we're back with Eric.
Coffee time.
Yeah, we're all juiced now. We had our coffee. This is kind of a lead-in. We're waiting for Fred to get back. We want everybody to join in on this one. We're going to talk about the book of 1 John, the Torah, things like that. And 1 John's amazing because it's not like a dispute with the churches. Paul's having a problem with this congregation, or this is going on over here. John just lays it out flat out. He says this is what's happening. He just lays it on the line. He tells you that if you're screwing up, he'll call you a liar. He has no problem with it. He's just straightforward, honest, and he doesn't pull any punches. And that's kind of like the way we like it, right?
Well, ambiguity leads to variance of opinion. And Yahweh says, I've mentioned before, that he has half a dozen words that are translated various ways. But in the words out of his own mouth, he says, well, here in Deuteronomy 7, the verses 9 to 16, let me just read that. Well, let me back up to verse 8. Because of Yahuwah's love for you, and because he observes the oath that he swore to your forefathers, did he take you out with a strong hand and redeem you from the house of slavery. So here, this is the week of unleavened bread, Chag HaMatzot, the feast of eating non-leavened bread for 7 days. That's a feast, and he said, talk about these matters, and so the Torah will be in your mouth. So the interesting thing about that is a play on words. The word matzah is spelled mem zadi, then the plural vav tav. Mem zadi vav tav is matzot. But the word that means commandment, which somebody could say is technically a law, is spelled mem zadi vav tav. Commandments.
Oh, it is.
Exact same word. Mem zadi hey, the root word, also means find out how to do something.
Kind of a dual thing on the bread of life.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like a 3 or 4 way pun. It's like if you want to be eating his bread, have the Torah in your mouth, don't eat leavened bread for a week in the spring, like he said, find out how to do something by regarding his commands. It's all the same word, mem zadi vav. And the mem is a prefix letter, means the place or the occasion, or this is the it, of zadi vav, which is the root of the word Zion, like Mount Zion. Zadi vav vav tav literally means to join the crew, man the crew, join the team, enlist in his service, doing what he said. He'll tell you to do something and you do it. That's to be on his team. And somebody pointed out the other day that Yeshua, I believe it's in the book of, let me back up. Yahusha. It's not Yeshua necessarily. The word shua, shin vav ayin, means to cry for help. And certainly when he was on the cross, he cried for help. He said, hey, why have you forsaken me? Or there's some question of that, and that's Eli.
Does Yeshua mean salvation too?
Shin ayin, shah.
Shin ayin.
Means help, to save, to redeem, to deliver. So it's technically Yahusha, I think.
Yeah.
And there's different ways to spell, it's called derivative words. So you have a root and then you take derivatives. But anyway, the point is,
I noticed in your book you vary between Yahusha and Yahusho.
well, the reason I have Yahusho with an O is because the letter ayin, technically the aleph is the A, but the ayin is our letter O before the letter P. The ayin before the P is our letter O. So it's not pronounced as an O. It's pronounced technically as the A sound, but it's in sequence, it's the equivalent of our letter O. So if you write Shah, S-H-A, there was a fellow in New Zealand that got pretty bent out of shape about it a few years ago, and because the word Shin Vav Aleph means vanity and to take it up with no concern, to bring it to shame, or to bring it to vanity, emptiness, ruin. He says, that's a sacrilege. And it's like, gosh, he's wrong because it's not Shin aleph, it's shin ayin, but he's right, because if we write ayin with the equivalent of the a because of the vocalization, it misleads people as to the appropriate ordinal sequence. And it's like, okay, that's the problem with Hebrew and English. And it's not a problem, it's the situation that when you're learning, you figure
Well, it's not a problem
these
now
things out.
because you explained it, but I thought, when you put the O on it in, that was a proper way to pronounce it also.
Oh,
So
it's
that
not pronouncing,
okay,
it's spelling.
But that probably clarifies it for some people that would assume like I did.
That's why I used to spell the word ayin, A-Y-I-N, because that's the way it's pronounced. But then I changed it to O-Y-I-N. It's like, oi! No, it's not that. It's the letters in sequence to discriminate between the letter ayin, ayin is the way it's actually pronounced, and it's not the aleph, which is actually silent. But anyway, it's just the more you learn, the more you have to start scrutinizing and discriminating and getting picky about things. As a matter of fact, there's a word that says to be meticulous and pedantic, scrutinizing grammar. I forget what the Hebrew word is, but it literally, it's where we get the word minute. It might be the word mem nun tav. It's meticulous, pedantic, scrupulous, just getting every little nitpicky. That's what it takes. It's one thing to step back and say, hey, I love God and He loves me. Morning, Lord! I had a friend for a while that's the way he used to start every day. And it's like, well, that's a nice way to start the day, I suppose. But then you have to start thinking, well, who are you talking to? Well, the guy who wrote the Bible. That's who I'm talking to. It's like, really? Then you start reading John, the first epistle of John, and it's like, no, wait a minute. When he said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And we were just talking the other day about this brochure that came in the mail, this writing that somebody gave, discriminating between the handwriting of ordinances, which is anything Moses wrote, as opposed to just the Ten Commandments with the finger of Elohim wrote on the tables of stone. I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow on this Eritology Skype call. We'll be talking about the Ten Commandments. But the point is, what does he want us to regard? And if we, because of well-meaning teachers, if we choose to disregard anything Moses said, hey, there was a picture you had of a cage fight that was being staged. There's the white-robed, poised GQ Jesus on this side, and the heavily robed, long-bearded, holding heavy tables of stone Moses on this side. And it was the picture, anyway, the graphic was pitting the two against each other as if literally there was this contentious face-off.
The way the mem was posed, and it's on my Facebook page right now with the study, I thought, it should be Messiah just ready to knock Moses out for all this crap that he stirred up. People going back to that stuff. It's hideous.
Something about the law creeping up on you? Like,
well, no, yeah, that was 3 things to let you know that the law is trying to creep up on
it's almost like we're here in the mountains of California, and literally, just the other day, somebody said, yeah, there's a mountain lion in the area. And if you go for a walk, especially in the evening or early morning, and you're by yourself, people have been stalked and jumped on, and animals, well, people have been killed by the mountain lions, dragged off. I mean, they'll look for you, and if you're unsuspecting, thinking everything's just casual, it's not. You got to be aware. In fact, the word to be aware is ayin resh. The word for city is ayin yod resh. The word for erectology happens to be ayin resh kaf. It's all related words. It means to be alert and vigilant and pay attention. You know, noise and commotion and stuff going on in a city is why that word means that. Also, to be, and you might say, stirred up and provoked and incited is a derivative of ayin vav resh, ayin resh, which is also the word that Adam and Eve were naked, derivative word with ayin and resh, and that the adversary, the devil, the nachash, whoever you think he was, the serpent in the garden, the nachash in the garden, it said was more, and it was the exact same word that's translated naked. Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed. The exact same spelling of the word, the same 3 letters, translated shrewd, cunning, you might say devious, planning, calculating. So it's just an interesting thing in Hebrew. He was more what they were than any other beast of the field. And what does that even mean? But because of the translations, we think of it as this way or that way. But just to say, the way this meme that you put up is phrased, it's like, hey, go for a casual walk, and there's a mountain lion sneaking up on you to pounce you when you're not aware. That's the law of Moses. The handwriting of ordinances which are against you were being told by voices, whether it's in a certain group of meeting or whether it's the internet or just random general prevailing voice of the... There was a movie somebody put out called Zeitgeist. They put out a couple of them, and literally those are words that I think are Latin or German, but Zeit is actually the Hebrew word Zion Aleph Tav. Zeit. It means this specifically, and Geist is where you get the word ghost, which means spirit. So this spirit, it's translated spirit of this age. So the general prevailing opinion around the world, in our culture, in our country, what's the general opinion? Nobody's saying that it's necessarily the church or this philosophy or this political persuasion or gender identification matter, but it's just the general prevailing idea is that the law is a mountain lion creeping up on you, ready to chew you up and spit you out, and Jesus will save you from that. So the question is that a true concept? Or how would you know whether it's true? Well, that's what the first epistle of John is talking about, and that's actually what Deuteronomy is talking about. And so we're just going to mention here a few things in Deuteronomy about
John,
that matter.
Constantly talking about guarding the commandments.
What commandments? The ones that were written by the finger on stone, or the ones that were handwritten ordinances that Moshe wrote? Which ones?
He's talking about everything. Well, he knew Torah.
But how do you know it's everything?
Well, because you go to Deuteronomy 4:2, and he says, don't add or don't take away, so as to guard the commandments of this Torah. That's what John's talking about. There's no middle ground. There's no dicing it up like the moral, ceremonial, ecclesiastical that the Westminster Confession has done for you.
Well, now, that means in order for me to believe what you're saying, I've got to take your voice and in my mind and in my heart pit it against the Westminster Confession of Faith was the foundation of belief for the entire Presbyterian Church going back about 400 years to the era of when the King James Bible was put together.
That was established in 1646.
Well, see, the King James Bible was 1611, so it's around that same era. I'm saying that as soon as they got the King James Bible in English,
they were tearing it up.
The smart guys who had the leading, the filling of the Holy Spirit all got together and prayed about it, and they came up with a list of, you might say, dogmatic statements. That's where we get the word dogma. It's boom, 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 boom. This is what it's about. The first one is, I believe, it says, what is the chief end of man? The answer, man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. We had to learn that. That's the only one I remember verbatim. But it's like, okay, is that true or not? What's the chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Is that true?
Well, it says our duty in Ecclesiastes is to keep His commands. That's our entire duty. So I don't know.
So then I'd have to sit there and say, I'm not calling I don't know, there was a few hundred men who got together to come up with Westminster Confession of Faith. And they call it that because in the city of Westminster, like Westminster Cathedral, there was a song about that, I think. Yeah. Westminster Cathedral. It was the same place, and over in England. Anyway, they got together and they prayed and they were led to put this together. But if I were to say man's chief end, is that his destiny or is that his purpose? But I can sit here and say that Yahweh says that we should guard and keep, all through Deuteronomy. So is man's purpose to guard His words, or is man's chief purpose to glorify Him and enjoy Him forever? What's the difference? How do you glorify
Yahweh? According to John, if you're not doing this, you don't even know Him.
So you're not glorifying Him?
No. So you can say it, and as John puts it, he goes, you can say this. You can say all kinds of stuff, but the proof's in the pudding. And John lays it out. He just starts slicing it up.
It gets down to the meaning or the definition of, or the qualification of the meaning of every single word in English or in Latin.
He said every single word, when you put it all together, the Torah is perfect. Now, you can't add to that. You can't take it away. You can't improve on perfect.
Sure it is. Greek and English.
Well,
Greek and English. Put the Hebrew words that are perfect into Greek and English makes them more perfect.
oh, yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm saying is you can't, you dilute it either way. You take it away from it, that's ruined the batch. You add to it, that's ruined the batch. You got to leave it alone. That's what guarding his commandments, his whole Torah, means.
So the whole idea...
Oh, another thing about 1646, in the Plymouth Colony, that's the same year that they established, they said, we're going to kill you if you do not believe it, that scriptures aren't inspired.
Which scriptures? The English ones or
The Bible. I mean, they're throwing the King James at you and say, if you don't believe this is 100% inspired, we're going to kill your ass. The same year...
Your donkey as well as you?
Yeah.
Both you and your livestock?
I mean, anybody that disputed, oh, that's not inspired. Okay, hang this sucker.
And the leeches, too.
Meanwhile, they're over there chopping it up and saying, this is what's relevant. Man.
So we are at a place in history, zeitgeist, the spirit of this
Woo.
time, this age, we're at the time when we're going back to scrutinize every detail. The interesting thing about that, we were talking about this last night, and we'll talk about it when Fred gets here, is that it's almost like Adam started out in the garden perfectly whole, perfectly a fit relationship with his Creator. And then he was told, well, don't eat that fruit of that one tree, which he did, which diminished him. But he wasn't given any other law other than tend the garden. So Cain ends up killing Abel shortly thereafter. That's the next story. Well, was that a sin? There's no law. There was no law.
Well, how could he say that sin was crouching at the door if there's nothing to find what sin was?
Well, so Aaron was saying how, our friend was saying, well, the law must have been written on their hearts because it certainly wasn't written on paper. There was no finger on stone. So if Cain killed Abel before there was a law, was it a sin?
Of course.
Why? What qualifies what a sin is? Well, Yahweh said, sin is crouching at the door. You should do what's right. So there must have been, built into human beingness, human consciousness, the human heart must have had some sort of plumb line reckoning built in by the Creator to discriminate between right and wrong.
Romans 2 describes that. It said, even the Gentiles, which have not the law, are a law to themselves. You know, I mean...
But so you have to define what the heck does that even mean.
You know, I grew up and stuff, and, you know, I knew I don't murder, and I knew that if I'm lying that I'm screwing up, but I didn't have to read it in the Bible or anything. I was born with that stuff. I knew when I screwed up.
So the Creator of humanity, the Creator of human nephesh, human mind, human heart, what it means to have a human conscience, He built it into us before He ever put it on
just the
paper.
Basics. I mean, stuff like the Sabbath, that's not innate. That's not something. You just had just the basics, or else, well, we'd almost be like the society we are today that has just even tried to push away the innate, inborn knowledge of right and wrong.
Well,
I mean, you can't even describe what a woman is. You can't say boy, you can't say girl, you can't say man, you can't say woman, because people get pissed off. So all that's even being erased. Everything that's innate.
So the interesting thing is, Adam starts off whole, right, reckoning inside with his Creator, walking with Him, talking with Him, and then he starts slipping away and falling till it gets to a point of total alienation and degradation of the human being, and then at that point of the lowest dissolving, we have to start scrutinizing with meticulous detail. What did He say? How does this work? What's going on? What does every word and letter that He ever said mean? And how do we bring it back to perfection? And you start rebuilding it. And as Fred, maybe he'll go into this again when he's here, but he was saying, that's like a car. Off the showroom floor, the guy just hops in, drives it and has fun. Then after you get a few miles on it or you bump into something, you got to start, well, did you put oil in it or not? The car starts falling apart. And then you end up, a guy like him finds a rusty piece of metal out in the field. And it's like, okay, now we got to find this factory specs. And how do you get this thing back to original standards. Well, that's what we're doing.
Exactly.
And it's almost this boomerang. Adam started here, falls to a point of disrepair, and then we have to start putting it back, and the objective is to get back to that right standing with the Creator as He intended. So when we read in Scripture where Yahuwah says, Israel, different from any other people group on the face of the earth, you I have revealed myself to. You I have known. You I have a certain relationship with, and I will give you my commands, my instructions, my decrees, my ordinances, express my heart of my identity, and you must walk accurately in my ways. That demand is put on no other people, but there's a human reckoning. But Israel himself, he gave his words, his heart, and it's actually called his face, though John says, this is a weird thing. Now, I saw this last night when we were talking. John says, I think it's maybe in the 3rd chapter, he says, no man is at any time has seen Elohim. Why didn't John say, except when Jesus was walking with us and we sat right there with him and talking to him, isn't that seeing the face of Elohim? Why did he say that? No man at any time. Why does it say Moshe sat there face to face with Elohim on Mount Sinai? And then why would John the apostle say, no man has ever at any time seen Elohim? Why the discrepancy of the storyline? So now, that's what I'm saying, you have to sit there and say, well, what does it mean to see him?
Well, maybe,
what does it mean to
maybe
have
there's
these
a deity
words?
aspect attached to Messiah?
Well, John didn't say, well, we saw Elohim when Yeshua was here, Yahusha was here. He didn't say that. He says, no man has ever seen Elohim. That gets into a whole other discussion. But what I'm saying is that the only way to deal with a real Bible study is to look at every single word in meticulous detail. And the reason we're doing it is because we are like this broken, rusty chassis of a vehicle found out in the field, bent up and ruined, that we now are trying to put back together. I mean, Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and all the king's horses and men couldn't put him back together again, but we're trying to put together what does it mean to be the people
We've got a lot
of
more
Yahuwah.
pieces than an egg. It's a big job.
But they all go together. Once you see
I
what he
know.
said, it's the
even
guidebook, it's
trying
the
to
treasure
piece
map of
together
how to
the
put everything back together.
End time scenarios about the situation with the bride, the wedding guests, who's taken in the wilderness, all those things. Who's going to be part of the second Exodus? Who's going through the tribulation? There's parts you just have to try to compartmentalize constantly.
Because there's a lot of spun
That's in the
out
wrong
ideas.
spot. I got to put this one over. Yeah, it's just like,
wow. We were talking the other day, it's like doing a Rubik's Cube and you get all of them but one. It's like, well, I got it. Well, pretty much got it, but this is basically it. And it's like,
keep going.
If you have one square out of alignment on a Rubik's Cube, it means the entire thing is wrong.
Fail.
It's a total fail just to have one. So to have all these ideas and doctrines and eschatological notions, the rapture, the millennial kingdom, the tribulation, and it's like, if one
See, that's what
is out of
pisses me
sync.
off, these people that think they've got it all figured out. Just like, what we're going to be talking about when Fred gets back is the assembly that's protected in the
Church of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
In Revelation chapter
We're
3.
going to touch on that a little bit because everybody feels like they're getting the crap beat out of them here, and like, why isn't he hearing me? Well, there's a reason we believe, and we'll talk about that later.
Well, John's talking about that. He said, if you don't do what he said to do, which is keep his commandments, you don't know him, which means the one you think you know isn't the real guy. So you're mistaken, you're misled, you're misguided.
But
Deuteronomy
what
13.
I'm talking about the people that are trying their best to be in covenant, trying their best to keep his commandments. Why are we getting beat up? And I think we can get some answers to that. I think we figured that out a little bit because you've gone through it, I've gone through it, everybody we know has gone through it, and when you're like, well, your word says, but what's going on here? It's like, and that guy that left that comment on that last video we posted, he's feeling it. He's like, what the heck?
So I mentioned the other day that part of that conversation is if Elohim were to walk up to you and say, hey, I've got a class, a seminar, a school, would you like to take my class at my school? And you go, well, I'm kind of broke right now, I don't have any tuition money. It's kind of expensive. He says, I'll give you the tuition money for it. Would you like to take my schooling? And if you say, well, if you're giving the class, it's got to be
Good.
worthwhile. It's got to be a good class. Sure, I'll take the class. It's like, okay, well, when does the school start? Well, we'll address that later.
He's praying that he's worthy to take the class.
How do I pass or fail this class? I mean, what am I supposed to do? How many homework assignments is there? I mean, do I have to go feed some poor people or whatever? Well, what happened to me back in 1987, I think it was, or 86, 3 times in 1 week, a thief broke in and robbed my house, and I ended up moving out of that place. It was down on Western and Washington in Los Angeles, down near USC, and I was living behind a 4-story house, and I was helping the guy rebuild it, and he never had any trouble before or later. He was turning it into apartments, and I was building a place in back, and I had like a year's worth of rent paid for by my work 3 times in 1 week, and my mom had been praying that the angels protect me, and I remember thinking after the second time the guy broke in, it's like, was the angel on a smoke break? It's like,
Or was the angel opening the door to the burglars?
Why, yeah. I mean, was he helping these guys? I mean, wow. And they took a lot of stuff. They took about $10,000 worth of stuff, and I had to move out and...
People might take offense that I said that, but keep going.
Oh, no, and I thought, well, gosh. So then I remember saying to somebody, boy, it's a good thing I have treasures in heaven because all my treasures on earth just got ripped off. And I stopped to think about that and go, wow. I have to believe that. And it's like, and then I realized it's like, what does it mean to, be a believer, be his people? When's this class going to start anyway? It'd be nice to take his class so I knew how to deal with these things. Well, he already dealt with these things. He says, rejoice in everything and pray for your enemies. So I had to pray for that thief, that Elohim would bless him. And I thought, if I found this guy, I'd want to tear him up. Well, he probably belongs to a gang, and if I thought I'd tear him up, I'd be strung out. And I was aware of that, and I thought, well, the greatest blessing that I could think of for this rotten scoundrel of a thief was to say, he's headed for hell. As a human being, his life is in ruin, and he's going to be suffering for eternity, doesn't know anything about the truth, he's completely blind and ignorant and headed downhill of a wreckage of a life. And I thought, Yahweh, please, let that guy know the error of his ways and turn his heart to you. That's what I prayed for that thief, though I wanted to hate him, and I thought, as a human, he's a blind, ignorant, crippled fool. Yahweh, save that man. That's the greatest blessing. And I felt at that moment an inner rejoicing, like the Ruach upon me going, yes! It's like, yeah, but what about your school? It's like, well, this is the class. The class is, you now get to respond. It's like, well, but what was the tuition? The tuition was he gave me $10,000 worth of tools and equipment years before that he's now going to let the thief take. We only have what he's given us.
And that's what I'm talking about.
He gave me the money for the tuition. The class was remove it and let you respond. Are we going to respond as he asked us to, with rejoicing, with faith, with confidence, with thank you?
In the Church of Philadelphia, it talks about keeping the word of his patience.
What does that word patience mean?
Oh my
Long
God.
suffering is one translation.
Yeah, look it up and look at all the uses of that. And it likens that type of patience to Job. It's like, I'm never going to make this cut. Oh, man.
The question is, do you want to take his class? His class is not here, learn this, and I'll give you a little special badge when you're done. Well, he might give you, his sign written on your forehead to save you from the coming problems, but it's a place in his heart. Yeshua said, I'm going, Yahusha, going to say, I'm going to go prepare a place for you. That's the reward, and it's not a matter of, do you have what it takes? He'll help you. He'll take your arm like helping somebody who has a bad leg or an old person to walk. It's a matter, do we want to be on that team? And the word team, Zadi Vavav Tav, is to say one who listens to and does his commands, just because he said so. These things I was going to say that the fellow who said, well, the handwriting of ordinances, there's The word ordinance is actually mishpat in Hebrew. Mem, shin, pei, tet. The word pei, tet means stalemate. So if you have a scrimmage, a game, and it's 0-0, or 20-20, or you're playing chess, and you each have one king left. It's like nobody can do it. It's balanced. That's the word mishpat.
Yeah, but
Shofet is the word for judgment. Just real quick.
Not the word they're using.
When he says handwriting of ordinances, that's the word translated ordinances, mishpat. It means balanced scales of justice.
Are you talking about Colossians 14?
Colossians 2:14 says that the handwriting of ordinances against us. I'm saying the Hebrew word translated ordinances is balanced scales of justice. And Yahweh says this word mishpat is the foundation of his throne. So Paul is translated as saying that the foundation of Yahweh's throne is quicksand. No, it's a solid rock. What, are you kidding me? So now I am challenged to say, do I believe what I see as the English translation of what Paul said to the Colossians, or do I go based on my understanding of what the Hebrew word mishpat means, which is a word out of his mouth, Yahuwah's own personal mouth and his finger? How many times does he say the word mishpat in the scripture? It's all over the place. This is a critical, essential word for his establishment of his kingdom, and Paul's going to toss it away like the handwriting of ordinances. What did he say?
In Colossians 2:13, you got to read the verse before it. He said, "And you, being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has quickened together with him, having forgiven you all transgressions, blotting out the handwriting of dogma that was against us." It's the sin debt that was erased. Nothing to do with any Torah.
No, this guy that wrote this newsletter that I just got, he was telling this other. He spent 20 pages saying it's the handwriting of ordinances.
Well,
it's what Moses wrote.
That's how the church, the Sunday pig eating.
So you're saying that this entire group of believers has it wrong?
All Sunday pig eating pagans have it wrong. Yeah, I'll say it.
That sounds like a satanic cult.
The word says, and we'll go through this later, that they cannot even know Messiah. Can't even know him.
If they don't do what he says, walk in his ways.
You can turn it around. By this you can know. He goes,
if you do what?
Well, we'll get into that later. Let's not give it all away.
Well, if you keep his commandments. The word commandment is mem zadi vav hey, and decree is het kuf. A rung of a ladder is het kuf. I'll tell you, you put a ladder up here and you miss a rung, you know where you're going? You're going to be crippled and broken on the ground. You're going to have to start over. Literally, the word translated law or commandment is chok, het kuf, and het vav kuf is a rung of a ladder. So he gives us his, what's translated, there's another word, his charge. He said, guard my charge, shamer mashamar. Do what I said to do. Hear what I said to hear. Guard what I said to guard. That's the way he speaks. When he says this word shomer, shin mem resh, he says in Deuteronomy 7:9-16, we'll look at that, but he says, for those who love him and safeguard or observe his commandments. Well, just the previous sentence said, he safeguards the covenant for those who observe his commandments, but the same word safeguard and observe is shomer. And it's also the word translated beware, beware for your souls. It's like, well, pay attention and take heed. It's all the same word.
There's Fred now.
That's in Deuteronomy 12:13. So you've got mishpat, right rulings, balanced scales of justice. You've got mitzvot, mem zadi vav hey or vav tav. That's translated commandment, but it's find out how to do something and do what he said because you're in his employ, you're in his jurisdiction. Then you've got shomer, which is translated as charge. You've got decree or law, which is chok. You've got teaching, which is Torah or Torot. And then you've got testimony, ayin dalet vav tav. And again, the word moed im, the ed, translated until, is also edi, is choice best treasure, ornamentation, and adornment. So Yahweh dressed himself up in these beautiful festivals, and said, now you have fun with them too.
Yeah.
Keep them like this week of unleavened bread. Put this stuff on, dress up in this, which is why he said...
That's what it means, putting on Messiah.
It's almost like putting on the dog, putting on the Ritz, putting on the Moed. It's the same concept. So, putting on the Zitzi. It's like, hey, he said do this because he thinks it's pretty cool. okay, let's do these things. It has nothing to do with Judaizing. It has nothing to do with going back to the law, or let the creeping mountain lion, the puma lie, grab you. And it's like, you know, the interesting thing about the word puma, which is the same as mountain lion, which is the same as cougar, in Hebrew it's pevav mem pum, which is the mouthy guy, the mouthy one. Mountain lion, mouthy. It's like, but well, Yahuwah himself, the word pene is my mouth. He's the mouthy one. He's the guy who says, listen to my words, scrutinize the meaning of every letter of every word, and do it with your whole heart. And we should probably curtail this here for time, but the idea of Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 13, Deuteronomy 11 and 12 and 8. Here, let me just read this one passage, Deuteronomy 7, verses 9 to 16.
Save some for later, man.
Well, here. You must know that Yahuwah your Elohim, he is the Elohim, faithful Elohim, who safeguards, that's Shamar, the covenant and the kindness for those who do two things, love him and who shamars his commandments for 1,000 generations. And
that's not up yet.
He repays his enemies in his lifetime to make him perish. He shall not delay for his enemy in his lifetime, he shall repay him. So it's not just, oh yeah, when you die, then you'll have to say, no, what goes around comes around. That's mishpat. Whatever you do comes back. That's mishpat. And he did not do away with it. So the idea that the handwriting of ordinances is what Moshe wrote, that's a lying translation. It's a misleading representation of what Paul intended, what Yahuwah intended, or what Moshe intended by writing it. It's a complete fabrication of lie, distortion, misdirection, which is by definition the word satanic. So the English interpretation of Colossians 2:14 is a satanic derivative. Okay, so you shall observe the commandment and the decrees and the ordinances that I command you today to perform them. And that word perform is ayin shin hey. So the three things he said. Here's a list of verbs. Love, aleph hey bet tav. Observe, shin mem resh. Perform, ayin shin vav tav. Remember, zakar, zayin kaf resh. Don't forget. The word forget there would be shin kaf het. You strayed, samik resh tav mem, which is where we get the word sorry, which is to have an intent. Turn around. You turned astray. Hearken, shin mem ayin. Rejoice, shin mem het. Return, shin bet tav. Don't stray. Again, a different word stray is resh yod het, which is a derivative of the word ruach, and reek, like a scent, a smell in the air, and it's like, don't just waft off. Oh, it seems like this would be so nice if it was this or that. What did he say? What did he tell us to do? The exacting precision of an erudite scholar is what he wants his people to be. And if you don't want to be that people, find some other terms of relationship. But to find the terms of relationship to be his, what would you say, his bride? Is there a distinction between being the bride and the bridesmaids, or between being his Zadivav manning the crew and being those that are just going on the joyride that the crew is sailing the ship?
See, that's what I don't get about churchianity. They really have no definition of what's coming. Is it you're going to float on clouds and strum a damn harp?
Well, Steve Reese does a good job at strumming the harp. I mean, some harps can be sounding good. You know what I'm saying? I'm
talking about their destination. They don't talk about any millennium because it talks about Torah coming back. People who are regarding it right now, there's going to be different levels for them in this coming kingdom. There's going to be people out there planting the vineyards and tending the sheep for his priests.
Wait a second. Here, verse 12 of Deuteronomy 7, the very next verse. You didn't know this was here. This shall be the reward when you, Shema, when you hearken to these ordinances.
Oh, you got me.
And you observe and perform them. Yahuwah your Elohim will safeguard for you the covenant and the kindness that he swore to your forefathers. He will love you, bless you, multiply you. He will bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land and your grain, your wine, your oil, the offspring of your cattle, the flocks, the sheep, the goats on the land that he swore to your forefathers to give you. You will be the most blessed of all people. There will be no infertile male or infertile female among you. Among your animals, Yahweh will remove from you every illness and all the bad maladies of Egypt that you knew. He will not put them upon you, but will put them upon all your foes. You will devour, like the puma, you will devour all the peoples that Yahweh your Elohim will deliver to you. Your eye shall not pity them, nor shall you worship their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Okay, so then we have to sit there, and, as that fellow said on the comment, well, why don't I see that happening?
Let's save that. Fred's back now.
Okay,
Let's
so the
wrap
question
this
is, in order to see this kick in, how many of who
up. For how
has
long?
to do what, when, for how long, enduring with what heart,
We're going to find out.
before Yahweh actually manifests that promise in Deuteronomy 7.
It's our duty to find that out. And let's end on that. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat, oh, that's right. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.